Have you ever felt like you're just walking through a social fog? You know that feeling, right? That deep frustration when you just can't figure out what someone is thinking or what they're going to do next. It's like you're constantly playing catch-up, always one step behind. Well, what if I told you there's a way to cut right through that fog?
It really is the big question, isn't it? We're all trying to solve this giant human puzzle, but it feels like we're missing half the pieces. This feeling of being at a disadvantage, of not being able to anticipate someone's next move, it can be absolutely maddening. But here's the thing. What if people aren't nearly as unpredictable as we think they are?
Okay, so let's get right into it. The answer to all this isn't some brand new psychology hack or a trendy life coach tip. No, this is ancient wisdom, straight from one of the greatest military strategists in history, Sun Tzu. He literally wrote the book on strategy, and it turns out he also laid out a blueprint for understanding people that's just as powerful today as it was thousands of years ago. Now listen, don't get hung up on the word enemy. That's not what this is about. Think of it as your competition in business, your opponent in a negotiation, or heck, even just navigating tricky family dinners. The principle is the same, and it's universal. When you have a deep understanding of the other person, all that fear and uncertainty just melts away. It puts you in the driver's seat.
So how do we get that deep understanding? What's the actual secret? Well, Sun Tzu believed that almost everyone's behavior is driven by one of 5 fundamental character types or archetypes. And if you can learn to spot these 5 types, you basically unlock the ability to see what people are going to do before they even do it. This is the framework.
Let's start with the ideal. This is the benchmark for all strategic thinking, the wise leader. And we're not just talking about being book smart here. This is a whole other level of perception. This is the type of person you should really aim to be and the one you have to respect the most when you see them across the table. They are the true masters of the game.
Think of the wise leader, like a grand master in chess. They aren't just reacting to your last move. They're already thinking 10 moves ahead. They're not rigid. They're incredibly flexible, able to adapt their entire strategy the moment the situation changes. They perfectly balance patience with bold, decisive action, because they never, ever lose sight of the ultimate prize.
All right, now for a total 180, let's talk about our second type, the reckless. These are the people who are driven by pure, unfiltered aggression and impulse. They're an absolute force of nature, but a very, very predictable one.
You can spot a reckless leader from a mile away. They literally can't resist a challenge. They're always chasing that quick, glorious win, and they almost always underestimate the danger they're in. Their impatience and their overconfidence are their Achilles' heels. And you can pretty much guarantee they will charge headfirst into any well-laid trap.
Now, on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, we have the cautious. Where the reckless leader is all about explosive action, the cautious leader is defined by their inaction. The cautious are basically paralyzed by their fear of losing what they already have. They will overthink every single decision, always choosing to protect their position rather than risking it for a bigger gain. And that right there is the key. Their predictability comes from what they won't do. You can bet they will almost always take the safest, most defensive option on the table.
Okay, let's move on to our fourth type. And this one is an absolute classic. The arrogant. Their entire reality is filtered through their own ego. And honestly, that makes them incredibly vulnerable.
The arrogant leader genuinely believes their own hype. They think they're untouchable. And that means they dismiss good advice and they ignore all the warning signs. And that is their fatal flaw. Their pride is like a blindfold. If you understand that, you can gently guide them exactly where you want them to go, and they'll think it was their own brilliant idea the entire time.
And finally, we have the fearful. Now, this is different from the cautious. See, the cautious is afraid of losing something. The fearful is, well, they're just afraid. They're completely controlled by worry and uncertainty.
The fearful leader absolutely crumbles under pressure. They despise conflict and can be intimidated into a retreat with very little effort. Any hint of aggression, any complex or uncertain situation, and they're going to be running for cover. Their behavior is so transparent because it is always driven by one simple thing, the need to escape pressure.
So, there you have it, the 5 types. The wise, the reckless, the cautious, the arrogant, and the fearful. But just knowing about them isn't enough, right? The real magic happens when you start applying this knowledge. This is how you turn all this theory into your own personal superpower. And it's actually a pretty simple 3-step process. First, just watch people. Seriously, observe how they react under pressure, how they make their decisions.
Second, match those patterns to one of the 5 types. Are they rushing in? Reckless? Are they completely frozen? Probably cautious or fearful. Once you identify their core driver, that third step, predicting their next move, becomes almost effortless.
And that's the real shift in your mind. You stop just reacting to what people do, and you start anticipating it. You're no longer just another piece on the chessboard. You're starting to see the entire game unfold from above. And that strategic perception gives you a massive advantage in any situation, from asking for a raise to just having a debate with a friend.
But hold on, there is one last and maybe the most crucial piece to this entire puzzle. We've spent all this time looking outward, analyzing everyone else. But the most important part of Sun Tzu's wisdom actually begins when you turn that gaze around and you look inward.
So, if you can now spot the reckless, or the cautious, or the arrogant in other people, you have to ask yourself the tough question. Which of these patterns define you? What are your blind spots? Because understanding your own tendencies is the first and most critical step in any real strategy. True power doesn't come from just predicting what other people will do. It comes from mastering yourself, and that is the real art of strategic perception.